Yeah, I'm very pleased to be invited to talk with you about built-in quality. And people that may know me may know that I have a large background in software testing, but I'm a little bit split in my mind, so schizophrenic maybe, because the last years I've been doing a lot of agile transition coaching as well. So I'm in two worlds. And I'm surprised actually that when I enter an organization to help them with their agile way of working, with the transformation towards agile, we do not talk that much about quality actually. And when I first got in, I thought, this is just in that one project, and we get to sort of things out first and then we start talking about testing, but it hardly ever happens. So on one side, I'm the software tester with a heart for agile. On the other side, I'm the agile coach trying to make agile delivery work. And where's the quality? And there's one topic I think where both worlds are overlapping, and that's with the area of built-in quality, which is getting more important and more popular. And so I'd like to share some things about that. So I'll take you on doesn't seem to work. It's a little bit delayed. I'll take you on a journey where we start with why organizations want to do agile in the first place. So I start in the area where I'm the agile coach, then I'll share some challenges that we encounter while embracing agile. We could talk a whole day about that, but I just made a summary of that, of those things that I think are relevant for built-in quality, to end up with the definition of built-in quality, and to have a look at what we as testers can do at various levels in the organizations to help organizations to deliver quality software. And then I think we need something like a maturity model, and so I introduced some levels of maturity that we can have within built-in quality. Does that sound like a good journey to you? Thank you. So this journey starts with the customer, because I think like for the last decade or last 15 years, there's been big change how customers perceive their organizations that they get their products and the services from, and the customer has become fluid, become very critical, but very hard to retain for the customer, for the organizations, to keep them with them or let them come back. For instance, the Chinese warehouses make it very easy on the internet, of course, to buy cheap products from the other side of the world, the Amazons and the like. So it's very easy, if you want to buy a product, to compare things and go somewhere else, which is difficult for organizations because you want your customer to retain to your office or your shop and buy the same goods as he did before. So we need to put the customer in a central place and keep him satisfied and let him come back to us. And in order to do that, as an organization, we need to stand out in the crowd, distinguish ourselves in a certain way, so that the customer comes back to us rather than does a survey and just buys the product from a competitor. If you look at what customers want, I think that's the rule of the 5 fingers. They want to have cheap products. So for one example, like the Chinese warehouse that I explained, it's very easy to buy stuff somewhere else on the other side of the world which is cheaper. But it also means that organizations might want to do straight-through processing, be more efficient in the way they deliver their goods or their services, so they can get better rates for the customer. Customers have become very critical, and they want to have, I think it was insight here, they want to have insight in the products that they're buying. So whether they compare the goods, or they want to know what policy they have for their insurance, what's happening with their pension funds, that kind of stuff. They demand insight in the products that they're buying. And I've been paying my pension funds for over years now, and to be honest, when I started, some money was deducted from my paycheck, and I never took notice of that. And a year ago, I was at a bank that did pensions as well, and they're making large adaptations to the systems, only to make customers enable to watch what happened to the money that they deducted from the paycheck on a monthly basis, to see what happened with that it actually was added to the pension and that it was invested in the funds that they were having. And I was kind of surprised by that, because I think that's what we expect nowadays as a customer. It's just standard. We want to know what happens with our money. We expect to have a log-on screen, have insight in all those data. And I was some kind of ashamed that for years I've been paying that money without taking care of that and wondering about it. But it was an eye-opener for me, like that's a new standard. But yet this was a bank that was a year ago making a big effort to make those adaptations so they could stand out and keep their customers satisfied. To stand out that the customer says, this bank gives me insight in the information, I know what I'm buying. And then furthermore, we like as a customer to adapt and control what we're buying. So that could be the amount of devices on our Netflix account. We expect that we can log in, change that, or maybe we go on a winter sport holiday or something like that tomorrow. And then just the night before we decide, maybe we should add an extra insurance, something for the skiing. And then we expect that we can do that online straight away and that it's delivered fast. So that's the fourth, right? So we expect the policy to be in our mailbox within a few minutes so we can go on the holiday feeling safe and secured. And the idea that we actually have got the insurance that we want. And to be honest, I was kind of annoyed when I bought the EasyJet ticket to get here that I had to wait for 3 hours before I actually got my e-ticket in my mailbox. So we expect it to be really fast nowadays. So for organizations that want to retain their customer, they need to adapt their services. They really need to speed up and think about how can we distinguish ourselves? How can we make that customer satisfied? And on top of all those changes, especially in a legacy situation where it's not that easy maybe to change those things and to bend those business processes around, we want it to be safe and we want it to be compliant and reliable. Because the things are online. If I don't have cash with me, so I need my bank card to work, that kind of stuff. If I'm late at night and I'm tired and I go on the bench and want to watch my movie, I don't want Netflix to be out of service. So it needs to be compliant, reliable, and safe. And banking, of course, means that we have a lot of governmental stuff as well that we need to take into account. Otherwise, it's a poor bank, we go to a different bank where we believe our money is more safe. So the customer has become critical, makes quite some demands. And what's the impact of that on the organizations and the way we develop our software? There's a terrible delay in this. I'm not sure what's happening. Now we'll see what happens. So when the customer makes a lot of demands, we're working on different products and services. So I think we're working on different services and making different system adaptations than we did 15 years ago. We need to embrace new technology in order to stand out and make a difference. And that means that the development work is different as well. Because we're working on different systems, using different technology, and we need to do that in a fast pace. Because we want to have, I know how it works. Yeah. We want to have business feedback on whether the idea that we had as a business stands out and is a good idea. And we want to have feedback on the quality of what we put towards the customer. So, no wonder that a lot of organizations. Do you have another clicker? Yes. I'll leave it. Yeah, it doesn't work. I'll just do the walking. That they embrace Agile, because Agile is meant to have fast delivery. And yeah, can you change it? So we should get this one out. Okay. Yeah. No, that doesn't really matter. I'll do it manually. That they embrace Agile, because that's meant to have fast software delivery and to put it out and create feedback loops. Yeah, you're helping me. Yeah, please do the next slide. So I would rather do it myself. That's easier. Otherwise, I have to stop my talk every time when I have to do it. So that's why we go to business agility. But strangely enough, as an Agile coach, I come in many organizations, and getting the agility working is quite a challenge. And doing Agile in a proper way is basically a kind of maze that you have to get through with a lot of pitfalls and obstacles. And I like to think that since it's a challenge, we get distracted from that quite a bit, and we forget or don't get to talk about testing and the quality thing that much. And the things that I see, so I can say we could spend days and hours. Yesterday at the speakers' dinner we had some discussions, and we kind of connected with a lot of things like what's happening and why are teams struggling, and we said, yeah, we recognize that. So it seems to be omnipresent and everywhere, but the challenge is of course to overcome that and make it work. But what do I see? I see there's a low predictability. So teams are very much focused on delivering user stories, and sometimes they have trouble with doing that. So they have poor refinement, they don't know what they commit to, and then they have a lot of surprises within their sprint, and they don't really get to deliver what they committed to. I see a lot of DevOps teams that are dealing with operational issues that are very hard to plan, so making it very hard to deliver what they committed to. But even if you look at epic predictability, the score at organizations is much lower. So teams are able to deliver user stories, but if you look how they are able to deliver as a group an epic that they plan to, and then an epic in the definition of something that has an end customer value, suddenly percentages drop from 80% to 60 or 40%. So it's very hard for organizations to actually complete things. I see organizations that are struggling with mini waterfall. So I was doing some kind of PO group PI assessment for making an annual roadmap. And actually, although this organization was doing Agile for some years, they managed to make an epic, like we prepare in Q4 this, and we execute that in Q1. So Q4 was last Q4. So the problem with that is that it's standard waterfall kind of things, but that means that delivering the solution delays with half a year. So if we want to make a difference to the customer and get that feedback, we're not doing very well on that. Then I see a lot of teams that are working in components, in system teams, and they don't have a clue about the customer journey. So Sasha was talking about customer journeys with the story map. I love that. I was at an organization that provided servers, so database servers, Linux servers, Windows servers, for other departments in the organization. And we were trying to speed things up. So I went to one of the teams, which was a component team, and I said, hey, how much time does that cost you to actually deliver a server? And then the lady said, well, that's an hour. And I was just about to start smiling and compliment on her, like, well, that's not bad. And she spontaneously added to it, well, that's what we do when we get the ticket, and I don't know where it's coming from and what's happening before us. And when we completed our ticket, I don't know what's really happening afterwards. And it was in real time like 15 days or sometimes even longer. So there was a very low performance. But they were not really aware of the end-to-end chain and the path they were having within the chain, which makes it very difficult to make a difference to the end customer if you don't know what the game is of the department that you're working for, if you don't know what services you're providing to the customer. So you ended up by hanging up pictures of smiling and frowning people to tell our team, like, these are the people we're working for. Actually, behind the work we do, it's a customer that we can make happy or sad. But it was a long way, and I see that very often. And where teams are in silos working on the system, there's a lot of dependencies that they have to deal with, to discuss. If the predictability is low and one team delays, that has an impact on the work of the other teams, which causes a lot of communication and frustration as well. And then we need to have an environment that enables to put things live. So I'm working for a Dutch bank right now, and a recent survey among leadership, the number one item that says that kept them away from value delivery was that they didn't have an infrastructure that enabled end-to-end delivery. And on top of that, what I see as a challenge, we want to automate because that's key. We want to improve, but we're so much focused on delivery and output of epics and user stories, we don't have time to improve. I was working at an organization where we found out that another department had a team on their impediment list. So they were saying, we cannot do our work because that team is not delivering. So we connected them, and had discussions with that. And the product owner of the teams got along very well, and we understood each other and said, we need to work on that, we're going to help you, and everybody was happy. And then said like, yeah, but we're for 90% working on operational issues, so we only got 10% of our time to work on that solution that you need so much. So it probably will take half a year or longer. Again, failing to deliver value for the end customer. So these challenges, I think, keeps us away from looking at quality, whereas quality is so much of importance, because if we were able to fast adapt our systems, take a system, get something out, alter it, put it back, we want to put it live, we need to trust in the quality. And I see many organizations that are failing to trust the quality of their system, have difficulties with the integration, have difficulties with the deployment, and well, are afraid to go live. And then the whole idea that I've been talking about the last minutes kind of crumbles. So what we need is to have trust in the quality of the system. And I think built-in quality, so this is my quote, built-in quality results in trusting the quality of the system so that we dare to adapt it and that we dare to go live with it. So we can make a difference to the end customer and get feedback on the ideas and the quality that we're having in the first place. And I hope we all use that quote in the next few months. So if that's what built-in quality is, maybe it's a nice idea to look a little bit more about definition and what it actually means, built-in quality. And it's not something new. Built-in quality is derived from Lean. It's been around there for years, and if you Google, you find a lot of stuff. And some of the stuff you find here, just ordinary examples, which says built-in quality, we find defects early, we do things first time right, fix bugs, do pair programming, write unit tests on the other one, build quality in each process step, make problems visible, and in the Toyota production system it's one of the core pillars, which states quality at the source, visual, make problems visible, and try to improve all the time. So when it's been around for so long, how come we are talking about it now? And I think it's gaining popularity. We had in the Netherlands, we had a conference which had a focus team on built-in quality, and I hear people talk about it more and more and more. And I think it's due because of the popularity of the SAFe framework. So SAFe framework is, of course, a framework that you can do if you want to do Agile at scale with multiple teams working in the organization towards building releases. And in the model you have on the top the alignment of the portfolio level, the value streams, you have the roadmaps, and then you got in the lower part you got the teams that are working, the ordinary Scrum teams that are putting up features and user stories and integrate them into something which is called a release. And whereas more people are talking about SAFe nowadays, so I'm not making a statement about whether I like SAFe or not, but it's very prescriptive. And here in the lower corner, I had it animated, but it's more difficult now. There's a small icon which says quality is built in. Just like quality is standard in Scrum, also the SAFe framework says in everything you do, in the whole stack of things that you can organize in order to have delivery in your organization in an agile way, we expect quality to build in at team level. And that's a good statement, but what does it help us? So it might be interesting to have a look in the SAFe framework to see what they actually describe that you could do to build quality in. And to be honest, it's been improved over the last versions of the SAFe framework, but still it's not really completely clear how you can build quality in. So that's why it's good to talk with each other about how we can do that. And these are some things that SAFe describes that you should do. So I will run through them very quickly. So I'm not going into detail for each of the steps, but they say think test first. So they encourage to do PDD, test-driven development, those kind of things. They say do a lot of automation, but do them on the right place. So they introduced that testing pyramid which we all know, which states don't do the end-to-end GUI tests, which are brittle, but automated unit level because they're fast, they're cheaper, they're more solid, etc. Then they say reduce the size of your test set. So make sure you can run your test frequently and fast, know what's in there, maybe sometimes try to get out some tests that are no longer usable, or make a regression test strategy that you have upon check-in a very fast smoke test, have some nightly tests and maybe a monthly run or something where you do all the tests that are not that important that you want to run once in a while. And while you have a fast test set that's automated, do a lot of integration. So they're very fan of the continuous integration deployment pipeline, which I think is becoming a standard now, which is a good thing. And embed quality in the development process. So if you look in the SAFe framework, they have a scalable definition of done, which is very nice, I think. But the interesting thing about the challenges with Agile is I see a lot of teams that don't use that definition of done at all. So if you have a scalable one, which says we have a team increment, a system increment, solution increment, and release, well, how many organizations are actually applying that? But it helps you to circle the things that I think are test items. So there's a lot of testing in there as well. So we have a role in building in quality according to SAFe. And if you're looking at things that are not particularly in the SAFe framework described, but I think that are good practices at a team level are these things. So I told you about the predictability as a challenge. I like refinement very much. I think it's a key topic. And I see a lot of people and teams that have refinement meetings, you might recognize that, where the product owner is typing in his Jira or his TFS the new user story, and everybody's looking, the whole team, while they're typing in the user story, and then we just barely have enough time to actually do some pokering, to give it some points or priority, and then the meeting is over. Lacking the whole purpose of refinement, to have elegant discussions between professionals about the best solution and the impact of the choices that we make technically in order to make it a quality solution. So I'm really a fan of making refinement a process with a backlog of 2 sprints ahead, where you have time to have desk time, whiteboard sessions with specialists that you involve in order to come up with a good solution. And it might help to have a definition of ready at an epic level, but also at the user story level, and clearly think with your team about what things need to be addressed in your user story before you take it on in a sprint. And I see this very often not being used. And one of the things that I like to add as a tester to the definition of ready is add the question, how are we going to demo it and what are we going to test in the user story? Do you use a definition of ready? Yes. You have these questions in? Very good, so you're one step ahead already. But you're making a frown with it, so.
I'm not quite sure if we are using it every time.
No, I see very often that's not being happened. Other things you can do, have collective ownership of the code. Who breaks it can make it. It's not standard, especially not if it's cross-team. But if you go there, you need coding standards. You can do a lot of pair working, which is also in the SAFe framework, or use the 3 amigos during refinement or reviews. Make the demos effective, do the unit testing, add peer reviews to them, and if you go towards the continuous integration and deployment, you need to have your version control in order and your test-driven development. So the planning is a really important thing. I once was doing a test manager assignment for a small organization, and I wanted to, because I had strict guidelines, start very quickly with testing. So I entered the planning room where the product owner and Scrum Master was sitting and doing the sprint planning. And I wanted to influence the order of user stories that they were going to deliver. Because I wanted to have some user stories that I could have mid-sprint or something like that, so I could do my testing. And I was kind of kicked out of the room, because you're the tester, we do the planning, completely ignoring and failing the fact that we're working together in order to have a testable working solution ASAP. So we can make a difference. So testing is not a tester's responsibility, but a team responsibility, and we need to have the automation in place. And I think these are just standard things. We should do them at a team level. But the question is, of course, not all of these things are testers' items, there are also team items. So what's the role of us as a tester? If you want to know more about these items, actually, we investigated that. Rick is also part of a peer conference that we annually sit in a house and talk all weekend with a group of 14 people about software trade. And we had some sessions which resulted in an ebook which tells you about how you can embed quality in the SAFe framework, which I wrote with Matt Patterson from the Danish testing board. But let's look at the tester's role in building quality. And I think if you look at the tester's role, there's some skill that we can recognize. It starts with the tester, which is the functional manual tester that does all the testing on its own towards a building quality ambassador. And that's the rest of the journey that we're going to take during today. Let me start with the tester that does test everything. He's walking with a big burden, because at the end of the sprint he needs to do a lot of testing, clickety, executable, and he needs to test against like the work of 3-4 developers. So the developers put out the software, and then one tester needs to test it all. You recognize that? It's still happening a lot. A few years ago I was coaching a tester that was completely stressed, and I tried to help him. So what I said, like, you're a component team, so basically you're working on one system, and you're making the same kind of adaptations all the time. So functionally they might be different, but technically you're making some kind of archetypes of adaptations. For instance, you're changing the web interface, or you're changing the calculation, or you're changing the business rules. Maybe your system sends out some letters or emails, and you're changing the emails or the conditions under which they send. So would it not be nice to change the role of tester by addressing these archetypes and sit with the team in a session and discuss how you can test that? And say, for instance, if there's a web interface, I expect you as a programmer to do the field validations and maybe the paths to the other screens. You can test that, I don't have to do that as a tester. I trust you can do that perfectly fine. But we might need to have a user to look at the look and feel. But where if we do a calculation or a business rule adaptation, I think as a tester I'm very good in finding the paths and the exception situations, so I want to be involved in that. And so you can make some discussions about who's doing what when we adapt certain aspects of our system. And when at refinement a new user story comes in, all you have to do is say, like, does this influence the web interface? Yes? Or so you're going to do some testing as a developer. And we need to get Pete or Harry in, the user, because we need to inform him that we're doing something next sprint and check whether he has time. And from doing that, I think the tester becomes from being stressful at the end, doing all the tests, more strategic level. It saves from test issues to overflow to the next sprint because we didn't have time to complete them, hence creating the mini waterfall again I was talking about. That really changes the role of the tester at a team level. And of course, we want to do the automation, so maybe the tester can also involve the developers better and say, like, if you do those tests, why not automate it? And I think if the developers need to do that testing, they're more likely to start with the automations, like they are. But we also become more kind of a test coach, where we not only determine the strategic way of we want to test, but also can sit with the developers or the users to help them out how they can do their testing. And in the ebook that I referred to, we had some quotation where we state, I believe that a lot of developers actually are quality driven and they like to do their tests and deliver quality solutions, but they're not trained as we are. So sometimes they're insecure and they find it difficult to do their tests. So they like to get attention by somebody helping them. Not always, because I've been in organizations where I went towards teams and said, like, from a strategic level, from a release level, I want you to do certain things in test and I want you to deliver certain reports. And they were kind of pushing me out saying, oh, we've done this for years now, we know how to do the tests. Bugger off kind of things. You'll see what we deliver when we deliver it. So there's some test coach struggle that you got teams that are likely to embrace you and are eager to get help, and teams that are not eager to get help and might need it. And on top of that, I put the alarm clock in there just to remind us that a lot of teams don't have time to improve anyway because they're focused on delivery. So we have to, as a test coach, find a way to encourage them to improve. And it's a little bit like Sasha's discussion we were having, I think, about making the automation work. You can make the story map. How do you ensure that it gets enough priority for the teams to work on? Because we have so many user stories to tick off. So the role is shifting, right, from the tester at a team level, from doing the clicks, thinking about what tests need to be done, helping the team members to do that in a better way, and maybe do the automation. But we should think about it as a tester at a team level. We're not there just to do the tests. It's very tempting to do automation or build a regression test set in some kind of tool. But we're not there just to improve the tests. We want to make a difference, which was again, stand out, make the customer satisfied, get software with business value early to production so the customer comes towards us rather than to somebody else. So you might need to have something like a maturity model to see how we build quality in order to drive the change that we need to enable that. And I had great fun because I was inspired by building quality from the manufacturing line, because that's where it's coming from. So imagine a production line that builds something. I'm not used to this running around. So you could have a development flow which is a little bit like this, right? We have a station where we build a component, the team assembles the components, in the warehouse they're shipped and then they're sold at the shop. And the lowest level, I think, of built-in quality would be to avoid the customer to be affected by an ill product, right? Because then we have basically a situation in control. We have an ill product, but the customer doesn't know that. All the goods that the customer gets are of good quality. So the lowest level of built-in quality in production line would be to have a quality check near the end, where we check each of the products that come out of the factory, and then if the product is of poor quality, we discard it or we reuse it or something, recycle it, and only the ones that get a check mark and are proper quality will leave for the shop and towards the customer. Customer happy, but the organization is not happy because it's introducing a lot of waste, and there's a lot of been work done on the products that are not going to the customer. But where this seems to be old-fashioned and very simple, when I was preparing this presentation and I was Googling for stickers of quality control labs, there were a lot of stickers to be available to buy, and the red ones with quality check rejected were widely available. So there are a lot of organizations that have a demand for these stickers. So this is probably happening, right? But if we want to have a bigger built-in quality maturity, we could do a shift left. And I had great fun with this. Joe Mazzeo had a presentation where he said these are the levels of built-in quality. Where at level 1, you see the defects don't leave the plant. That was the situation that I just sketched. But here at the 4th level, we avoid components that are not good to be assembled into the end product. So it's a higher level of maturity. Would be cool. Less waste, less time wasted, better efficiency. And there's a 5th level, and that's defects are not created at all, which is very good in the learning organization. So what happens if we translate this model towards an IT department? I had great fun thinking about that. And I thought the lowest level of built-in quality would probably be the software update. Because we put out software, for instance, the iOS of a mobile or something like that, out to the public. We discover there's something wrong, or maybe one customer is affected by it, and we just do a software update, and then all the rest of the world is not affected by that error. Happy customer, because he's not affected by the illness or the bug or the error, but maybe we create a lot of waste. But if we want to go to a higher level of maturity, we might want to draw some kind of development flow like I did with the stations. And this is what I came up with, which is just an example because in your organization it might be slightly different. But the development cycle would probably be that we have a roadmap where we make the yearly release planning, then we make a release planning which we add the user stories or the epics on the months or the quarters. And when we have the epic defines, we go into refinement and we break them down in user stories so we can add them to the sprint. Then we have the sprint where we build it, do the unit testing, do some non or functional testing, do the integration end-to-end testing. Then we have some acceptance phase where we test in the system of systems whether the whole customer journey is actually working, which is an interesting one because that does not always happen. But I like to emphasize the customer journey. And then we do some monitoring in production and incident handling so we can have the lowest level of maturity in place at all. So if you want to go shift left and go to a higher level of maturity, we go up higher levels in the organization and in the development flow in order to detect errors earlier. We're trying to find those components or maybe higher than that, where we can say like we're not integrating these things because they're not well defined. They don't have proper quality. So I came up with this picture where you have the development flow and you have feedback loops where we want to prevent errors before the customer is effective at a lower level, or if we go higher, before user stories are built or user stories are defined or before products maybe are even scheduled. And I think that changes the role of the tester to becoming some kind of built-in quality ambassador. And if we want to do that, what does that mean? I think if we want to be a built-in quality ambassador, we're striving to have quality enabled, embedded in every stage of the delivery thing. We want to reduce waste by detecting errors early. We want to make defects visible in the organization and ensure that the organization is acting upon them. And we want to avoid defects to be created. And that means that if we take on this role, rather than being a clickety-clickety-click tester that's stressing at the end of each sprint in order to have those manual tests done, we're taking a very responsible role in order to make a difference for the organization. And one thing that we have to do is to zoom out from that team level, where there was a lot of focus on in the SAFe framework, and we should check where we can make most of the impact. And that might not be automating the regression test set with a lot of testers that do a lot of scripting, and we create a big, large set of tests that we can run automatically, because it might be somewhere else in the development chain. And where I cannot answer, because that depends on your organization, but we could have that discussion, of course. And I think there's value in having a mature discussion with the right people about where do we define quality, how do we define it, how do we measure the quality in certain stages of our development process, and what do we do when you detect that it's insufficient. And I gave you two examples in the shift left stage at the beginning of the development cycle. For instance, the epic. I always say an epic should be owned, profitable, sized, and an end-to-end solution. So if an epic is raised and it does not comply these things, there's not a definition of ready on the epic level, which says that it has a business sponsored, there's no business case, we don't think it can be done within a quarter. I like to have epics on a quarterly base. I know a lot of organizations have epics that take half a year or longer, whatever, but I like it to be in a quarterly thing. And when a new epic is raised, I think the chief product owner can check these things, and we can have a discussion about what does that mean to check, and how does it look like. Another example could be the roadmap. So a roadmap should be feasible and realistic. So I think that means that we take into account an epic width limit. So how much epics are we doing simultaneously? That shouldn't be too much. We should take into account dependencies by the teams. So if there's too much dependencies, then it becomes fragile. But maybe we can take into account skills that are needed in order to complete the epic or expected deadlines. We can have a mature discussion about what it means to have a good roadmap. And we can have discussions when we're going to measure that. For instance, during quarterly planning or PI events. And the best thing I think about the story is the thing that we can learn from Toyota and from Lean, and that's the stop the line. Or does it say hold the line? It says stop the line. And in the Toyota manufacturer, you got that enden cord, the one thing, or yellowish thing on top, where any employee can pull the cord and stop the production when he detects something is wrong. And then Lean says, go seek the origin of the error and don't go further with production, don't start the line until you have solved that problem. And that's the way to improve. And I think in software development, we don't have to put everything down, but we might want to stop a single epic, a single user story, a single release, or something like that, to go further in the process. But I think it's unprecedented. It's not done very often that we have discussions about if we define a feedback loop and discuss how we can measure the quality, what do we do when the quality is not sufficient? Can we stop the line? And what do we do when an epic is insufficient, or a roadmap is insufficient, or a user story is insufficient? So there could look something like that. So it's the same example, but I add something. When an insufficient epic, it's rejected, and then the CPO sits with the sponsor to assess the impact and may adjust the roadmap. So it's kindly words for saying we're not doing the epic. And there will be a lot of people being angry with that, but if we agree that we're doing that, then we get much more control on our quality. And we can have discussions who should be involved in the decision. For the second example, it could be that if we have the WIP limit exceeded, so we put too much epics in there, or introduce too much risk, we just go make an extra loop and refactor the roadmap. But I think there's value in having that mature discussion, like what do we want the roadmap to look like, when do we think it's good quality, and what do we do if we detect it's not good quality. And it's not done in many organizations. I have never seen it happen, actually. And if we want to do measurements, we need to speed up. So we should have in the discussion also a thought about how can we design a feedback loop that doesn't block us, that doesn't slow us down, because we need to keep the pace of the development going, right? Especially if you have those thousands production releases that Amazon was having, that we saw in the first presentation. We need to be fast. And you can find these kind of pictures on the internet about programming and how fast the feedback loops are, but they're all starting from coding and not moving up in the development cycle. So if you want to shift left and have a higher built-in quality maturity, you might get something like this, where we say like it takes 1 or 4 weeks to have a feedback loop on the release that's been scheduled, because there are slow processes. But of course, a technical release, we want to have that in the same sprint as a feedback loop. So we might want to design that. And when we're installing these measurements and executing them, we get a lot of information about how often the roadmap is blocked, how often epics are blocked, how often user stories don't get into the technical release, that kind of stuff. And we might want to move on using that data to the 5th level, because we can initiate some root cause analysis sessions as built-in quality ambassador and say like, we got the data now, we've done this for some time, we noticed that there's a lot of things being blocked. Why is that happening? How can we avoid that? And I believe that's a good thing, because then we start improving. So if we take on the role a little bit as a built-in quality ambassador, these are the rules that we need to do in order to make an impact. We should check where we can make most impact, where quality measures have the most impact and are most effective. We should initiate discussions and agree what we do when we stop the line, when we detect that the quality is insufficient. We should assure that assessing should never become a bottleneck, so we should design the speed that we needed for that, and we can initiate root cause analysis sessions to really start the improvements. And then we're building in quality. And that was basically my trip that I wanted to take to you. And what I told you today is that we started with the customer, we showed the demands that the customer have. It's hard to retain the customer, it's becoming more critical. And the way that the customer is looking at companies and organizations like ours changes the way that we develop and the things that we're working on. We need business agility to get fast feedback and to stay ahead of the competitors. So we embrace Agile, but we need to have that trust in the quality. So we dare to go live, which is a challenge for many organizations. And we looked at built-in quality and looked at measures at team level that we should take from the SAFe framework, from common practice. And believe me, I believe we need to do those things, so we don't need to discuss that. We need to have that automation, continuous integration and deployment, and et cetera, et cetera. So don't discuss that, just make it happen. But we should exceed the team level and change the role of the tester from doing the clicks to becoming a coach, help with the automation, and maybe pursue the position of a built-in quality thing. So we should design the feedback loops and show through the globe with where we can find errors, and then initiate discussions in order to have measurements taken, quality measures, at the place where it makes most impact, with speed that doesn't block the cadence of the organization, make agreements, and I emphasize that once more, initiate that mature discussion, like what do we do when it's insufficient, and initiate root cause analysis to make an impact. And I believe if we do that, the predictability will increase. We have less waste, we know better what we're doing, and we're better able to complete the epics that we commit to for the quarterly period. We reduce a lot of waste because we help the organization not to work with items that are of ill quality. We have end products that are better quality and will shorten the time to market because we've reduced the surprises. But last but certainly not least, I think we create leverage at team level to do further improvements, like automation, where we notice that a lot of teams don't get time to do that right now. So this will stimulate organizations to become better, but also to help teams to become better and get time for improvement. And I think that's a major advantage if we take built-in quality as a serious central position. So thank you very much.
Okay, so while Patrick plugs in the computer, do we have a question from the audience first?
Yes, so the question is this quality ambassador, is this a guy who goes into the team and then helps the team and then after 2 months he goes back, or is this a guy who joins the team and then stays in the team?
The built-in quality ambassador?
Yes.
I think he's operating cross-team and higher level than the team level. So you might engage also with product owners, the central product owners, the stakeholders, with leadership as well. So you might be seen at different levels in the organization.
Okay, thank you.
If I want to add, so a second thought, it depends, I think, on the size of your organization. So if you have a big organization, you got a lot of testers, and we can all be quality ambassadors, of course. And so there might be people working with the team and people more working with the product owner or the stakeholders. So there might be some cascading in there. In a smaller organization, you might be the one guy that does it all.
Okay, so Marcel's been busy on the slide. Do you like the SAFe framework?
Well, I have mixed feelings about it, to be honest. So when I first started talking about scaling Agile, I met a lot of people that were negative about the SAFe framework because they say it's enabling a lot of organizations to be very process-like and move away and forget about what Agile really is. So I was in their flow saying, yeah, the other frameworks are better because they're about doing Agile in a proper way. So there was the last school, of course. But then when I looked more into the SAFe framework, there's a lot of information in there as well. So it kind of got me impressed in how much they thought about things and how much they made available for free on the website, which I think is rather cool. But then you got the certification part, which is rather expensive. That's the business model behind SAFe, which is less cool, I think, for us as consumers. But the things like the PI events are very attractive to me. So I noticed that although I'm not really in a SAFe environment and not aiming to do SAFe, I like the idea of having those cascades and the PI events very much. So I'm mixed. Is that who's Marcel? Oh, okay, Marcel. Hi. Is that sufficient answer? Yeah. We can discuss that later.
He's trying to be
Yeah.
provocative. This is an interesting question. I would wanted to ask this one myself as well. So you mentioned shift left.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about shift left for years in testing. Yeah? We need to test early, blah, blah, blah. But I was at the conference last year, and there was a guy there talking about canary testing. I was like, what's canary testing?
Yeah.
It's testing in production. So how does that affect your ideas?
Not at all. That was the answer. No, I think I had the monitoring in production, so it's good to shift left and filter out the waste, like I explained. But there's always value in detecting errors in production or finding ways to get effective feedback loops if you design the correction time with it. So there's no problem with putting faulty software in production if you're already able to correct it in an instant, or if you can target it and limit the risk. And I think that's a good thing. And sometimes that's necessary in a complex environment, which is hard to have a test environment like. I think in IoT environments where you don't know how things are being used, it's very hard to simulate that in a testing. So you need to go to production. But you should still have that, I think, built-in quality discussion, like how can we detect an error and what do we do when there's something wrong? And how fast are we in solving that? And if that's in control, then there's no problem.
Software is fixable.
Yeah.
If you create some widget, some physical thing, and you get to the end of the manufacturing process and it doesn't work, then it's wastage. But do you think, it seems to me that one of the biggest problems in telling people to shift left, to test early is, oh, we can fix it if it's wrong. And if you've got Amazon deploying 100,000 times a day or whatever you're saying, their approach is, okay, if it's wrong in production, we'll fix it. We can fix it within minutes. So I don't need to waste time, as they would say, to shift left. I'll fix it if it's wrong.
Yeah, it's an interesting statement, and it's true. I've been talking with engineers that were making wingtips in CAD systems, so they were designing wingtips, and we were discussing how you could do agile with that. And they say that the central beam of the wing of an airplane, you have to order it a year in advance. And you can drill an extra hole in it if you, in a late design stage, discover that you need some wires to go through it. That's no problem. But if you wanted to have an extra meter to it, well, you should have ordered it a year ago. So it's really interesting how you go in agile there, and you have to design your feedback loops. So that's one side of the story. The other side of the story, I still believe, and to be honest, I'm struggling with that. In a situation where you have those thousands of releases, and you do continuous integration and deployments, and you do the feature toggles kind of things, technically you go live all the time. But I still am struggling with if you have the roadmap, and you have your strategic ideas or your business idea, there should be some business validation. So if we as an organization decide we should change this because that changed the way the customers perceive us, and will make more customers or better customer satisfaction if we, well, change the logo and the corporate style all through all the products or something like that. We can make a lot of adaptations and put it live, but there should be some feedback loop closed. Where so like we changed the color from orange to green, and we changed the logo and the fonts all through every letter, etc. Did it yield any results like we wanted to? So yeah, there is always a business feedback loop, and I don't think that's as fluid as the software is. So we can do a lot of experimentation, but there is a slower pace in the organization. Currently I'm working for a very big bank, and cascading is the hype word. We're talking, I wasn't using that last year, but this year I'm cascading this, cascading that. And you see there's a lot of emphasis on how can we make corporate target goals, break them down in department goals and team goals, etc. So that's a slower pace. So yes, we can adapt the bug very quickly, but if we really drive and change on a strategic level, it goes much slower.